tell y'all and all our people viewing Happy New Year. The first order of business is to approve our minutes, and I'm going to call on our Vice Chairman, Mr. Paul Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reviewed the minutes as shared by email. I find them in order. Therefore, I move for approval.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second? Second. A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Second up is our investment report. And here comes Mr. Beatty. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. I normally don't take long, really a short report. LGIP rate wasn't available as of this afternoon, but our bank rate is up. We're just under 4%, quite different than where we started the year. We've been involved in a lot of tax collections that are going well, and I will remind everybody that county taxes are due without interest through February the 28th. So if you have any questions, feel free to call us. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions for Mr. Beatty? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Okay, next is our fund condition report. We'll call on our finance director.
Good evening. For the month ending December 31st, we had $489,526,135.87 of cash on hand. 92% of that was operating funds, and approximately 8% of that is borrowed funds. On the revenue report, I would like to note a couple of things. Sales tax continues to be up. Sales tax is up 10.92% as of December. Our hotel motel tax is actually up considerably. That is up 18.61%, so that is good news. As of December 31st, we have collected 50.19% of property taxes, and you can see the comparison on your revenue report of all the years, so we're right in line with where we should be. I would like to note that in tax year 2019, fiscal year 20, that we only collected 29% as of December during that year, but that was a year that some escrow payments came in January instead of December, so that's just an anomaly there. And then, as Mr. Beatty mentioned, interest rates are still up, so you'll notice on our revenue report, some of our revenues are running 191% to budget. That's really just because of interest rates going up so much more than we're budgeted. And with that, I will take any questions.
Any questions from the committee? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner and Commissioner Irving seconds that. I do have a comment, especially about the last thing that you mentioned was the interest rates have climbed quite a bit. I know Chairman Phillips remembers this, and Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Gooch, but in the past 8 years or so, we've made very little money on interest, because, you're talking 1 or 2, 3%, somewhere in there. When I was on budget years ago, it was easy that we would get $8 to $9 million a year on interest. And the reason I'm bringing this up, one thing that we did on our last budget is we took money out of our debt service. And Michael, I encourage any of you to talk to Michael about that, but that's something we need to replenish. And to me, this would be a good thing. And the reason I'm throwing this out here now is I want you to think about it. I don't want any moves on this tonight, but either all or part. I'm kind of an all or nothing, but at least part of that money, I think, should be going back into our debt service to get that replenished. And if we want to maintain this AAA bond rating that we're so proud of, that's one thing that we're going to need to do. But that's just a suggestion for the committee. It's up to you guys to to make that decision, but that's an option that we haven't had in the last 6-8 years anyway. So, Mark, have we got a motion and a second on this?
We do.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Michael. Okay, risk management financial report. We'll call on Mr. Elam.
Good evening and Happy New Year to you also. So the 264 fund for December 2022, revenue you see $9,571,129. Expenses you see $6,741,025. Revenue less expenditures a positive $2,830,104. The total for the calendar year 2022 is revenue is $88,236,720. Expenses $81,186,802. Revenue less expenditures is a positive $7,049,919. For the fiscal year totals, you'll see that for revenue is $38,284,840. Expenses is $41,038,188. Revenue less expenditures is a negative $2,753,348. The 266 fund for the month of December 2022, you'll see workers' comp is $2,380.98. OJI is $60,786.21. Year-to-date total, $1,357,670.81. For workers' comp, OJI is $263,622.26. The total for the year is $1,621,300.07. Commissioner Irvin asked the question, I believe it was last time, about the incident rate. We had not received that information from the state yet, but we have in the bottom of the calendar year incident rate 2022, the counties, we had that posted. It was 2.15, and the state rate came in at 4.2. So the incident rate, just to give you a little bit of explanation, it is the number of injuries and illnesses that we have times 200,000 hours, and then it's divided by employee hours worked, which is total for Rutherford County, provided by the finance. We get those hours provided by the finance department. And then the legal expense, attorney expense, we have for the month of December, $36,689.28. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Elam from the committee? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Shrino?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris? Yes. Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
Y'all have a good night.
Okay, this brings us up to number 5, the state grant for the Election Commission, Microvote General Corporation contract and related general fund budget amendments. Mr. Farley, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Have before you tonight a grant contract or memo from the state of Tennessee in the amount of $1,529,900 for the purchase of new voting equipment from Microvote General Corporation, and this grant does not have or require a local match. It's 100%. And this is due to the General Assembly passed legislation back this past spring requiring all voting equipment to have a viable, visible paper audit trail. So the Election Commission accepted 5 bids, looked at those, and awarded that bid to Microvote. And so just coming here for the funding so we can pass through and receive the state grant.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Farley?
Hey, Alan, how are you?
Good.
So that 1.5 million, how many machines is that by?
340 machines.
And what do we do with the ones? Do we phase them out? Do we take the other ones, or do we just keep 300?
They will completely replace the old equipment. The old equipment is pretty much as non-usable.
So we just throw it away?
We'll dispose of it, yeah, because there's some metal, so we'll recycle as much as we can, then we'll dispose of the rest.
Okay, thank you.
340.
Alan, can you talk briefly about kind of the process and kind of the relationship between the Election Commission and the Secretary of State and how all this gets to this point?
Okay, as far as how we're tied to the Secretary of State's office, or?
Right. In other words, we don't really have too much discretion, I think, or do we?
Well, the TCA 212-116 states that the Election Commission will choose the method of voting as far as the equipment, the awarding of that contract. So they have received the bids through the purchasing committee, and then they've looked through, based off of recommendation given by myself and our staff, have accepted and awarded the bid based on funding. And so that's what we're here tonight. Now, the Secretary of State's office is the one who oversees elections statewide. So that falls under their jurisdiction at the state level. So with this legislation that was passed, the funding component, there's HAVA money, which comes from the federal government, and then there's also, I believe there's $15 million that was set aside at the governor's budget in the state budget to go ahead and there's 45 counties who do not meet this requirement. So those funds will be used for those 45 counties to purchase equipment, voting equipment that will give a verified paper audit trail. So when you vote and you push the button, and then you'll have a paper recording come up, and it will list, Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, all those individuals that you vote for, and the office they vote for, then you confirm it, and then that way that can also be used as voter verification for the voter, but also it can be used in a hand audit if there was, for some reason, that there was a contest of election and went to court, and you could actually use that as a hand count ballot as well.
So we're basically just taking a grant from the Secretary of State or from the legislature?
Yes, what we're doing is
we're going to approve that.
We will fund,
Grant.
the monies will come, Mike, let me know if I'm wrong here, but basically we'll fund this, and then the purchase will be made, and then the state will reimburse us through the grant, and basically it's just a swap of money.
That's correct. We'll be floating the money for however long it takes the state to reimburse us. I assume it'll be a few months. My understanding is it has to be before the end of the year, is my understanding. They have sent us a letter saying that they are guaranteeing to reimburse us, and we do expect an actual grant contract next month, is my understanding from the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you.
Mr. Harris.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any other questions for Mr. Farley? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Johnson? Yes. Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Sereno?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. We have one other, is that correct? All right, go ahead.
Okay, I do have a budget amendment in front of you. This budget amendment is requested to provide sufficient funds for election workers as the cost was more than initially budgeted. More hours were needed to help during the August and November elections, but funds are available in other salary and wages due to leaving a current position vacant for the rest of this fiscal year. And so it would decrease line item 189, $48,546, line 187, $7,000, line 204, $5,643, but increase line item 193 for a total of $61,189.
Okay, you've heard the request. Any questions or comments? Thank you, Commissioner. And a second, Commissioner Irving. Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Srinial?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Before you
Mr.
leave,
Allen.
Before you leave, remind everybody about what they need to do by the end of the month as far as their reports to.
Oh, yeah. Most of you who have open campaign accounts, y'all do need to file your financial disclosures and also your statement of intent if you have not filed with the Bureau of Ethics and Campaign Finance in Nashville. But if you got questions about either one, give us a call. We'll help you with that.
Mr. Farley, just if you don't mind, you said there's 340 machines. How many machines do we have right now?
We have 293 right now, so this was anticipating growth, and so we tagged on 50 extra machines since the state was paying for it to help accommodate our future growth.
And are they all used like in every election, all used at the same time, or like in a presidential election, you use more than a local election?
We will have, of course, we'll use every machine in the presidential election, just on volume. And pretty much with vote centers, what we do is we set up based off of demand, which we have more people who vote west of I-24 than we have that vote in what I call Murfreesboro proper.
Wow.
So, we have 7 of our 10 largest vote centers every election are located on the west side of I-24.
Thank you.
And that's where the majority of our new machines are going to. That's where the volume, that's where the growth is. Yeah. So.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the ambulance service budget transfer. Mr. Gaither here. Ah, there he is. Welcome, Brian.
Good evening. We're asking to move $300,000 from the paraprofessional line item to the part-time line item, and the reason for that is we've changed the way that we pay the part-time employees.
Is it saving you money?
That's a good question, but we originally we paid straight time for the first 8 hours and then time and a half for the 16, and that was encouraging them to work the whole 24-hour shift. But that rate of pay was lower than the normal rate of pay. So it was we had some part-timers that were more than willing to work the 12-hour shifts, but they weren't going to do it for the $10, $12 an hour range. So we took, and really that pay rate that we were paying the part-timers, it really didn't exist in the table anymore.
Okay, any other questions for the director?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Second and a light out. Any further discussion?
I have a couple questions. How many part-time employees we got right now?
We have around 40.
What's their per hour right now?
Well, it's different EMT and paramedics, and kind of where they are in experience. But it's we pay up to 5 years experience. That's the max that they pay. So whatever that rate of pay is in the full-time scale is the same. So if they have 3 years experience, then they're at that rate of pay.
Any other questions? Call roll, please.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Shrinian?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Have a good evening.
Okay, next up is an application for amendment to the Juvenile Court State Custody and Prevention Grant.
Chairman, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Travis Lampley. I'm the judge of juvenile court here in Rutherford County. We're here today asking for an amendment to the budget to allow for a pass-through grant, making a one-year extension on a two-year term for some pass-through funds from the Department of Children's Services in the amount of $46,448 per year. And this will go towards our Solutions Education Center grant for the prevention and intervention of substance abuse, drug and alcohol substance abuse for our kids. There is no required match from the local county.
We've heard the request. Are there any questions from the committee? This is
Motion to
Commissioner-
approve.
Commissioner Harris with the motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Sereno, a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? None, call roll, please.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Shrinian?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, sir. Okay, next up is the general fund amendment and transfer for the sheriff's office. I think there are a couple items under that. Welcome, Mr. Spence.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. The first budget amendment is to move forward with purchasing sheriff's office vehicles instead of leasing. This amendment was revised this afternoon. You should have a copy of the revised copy. We're asking for $1,357,515 from the restricted capital projects, $755,229 from the lease payments line item, and placing $2,112,744 into our motor vehicle line item where we can purchase our vehicles this year. This is going to save us money over time. We feel like it's going to make it easier to get our cars in quicker. We're just now getting vehicles in from last year's lease program. We got the first two today that we ordered last year.
Okay, you've heard his request there. Are there any questions, Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. Do you see this, that we're getting away from the leasing program and we'll be purchasing moving forward?
Yes, sir.
For the
Starting
most
this year,
part,
we would like to move forward on purchasing the vehicles.
I'm sorry?
We would like to move forward on purchasing the vehicles from here in the future.
And that would be in the future, too?
Yes, sir.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second.
Who is the second? I'm sorry.
Commissioner Johnson.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, I don't know, are we going to discuss this further down the line? I don't think so. On the lease, do you want to elaborate on that, or Mayor? Either one, whichever prefer.
Your turn, Don. Go ahead.
I think one of the reasons we started looking at this a couple months ago when I got here, I've met with the mayor's office and the sheriff's office, is when interest rates started rising, how this arose is we realized we were paying some really high interest rates. For example, one of the last vehicles we received for the sheriff's office, that interest rate was 7.71%. And for the month of December, we spent a little over $12,000 in interest. So we're spending almost just this year about $150,000 or more in interest this year just on our lease program as a whole for the county. And as we continue to lease more and as interest rates rise, as some of our lease vehicles that have a 4% interest rate, as those roll off next year, right now with interest rates being up, they're going to roll back on at a 7 to 8% interest rate. So we could very well be sitting at $200,000 a year in interest just on vehicles for the county is kind of how we started looking at this. So this amendment right here would move to purchase, I believe it's 30 vehicles at a cost of a little over $2.1 million. If we were to amortize that over 4 years with the current interest rates, I would anticipate that being closer to the $2.5 million range that we would spend in total. So I do anticipate this saving the county money over time. And then one of the things that we're also taking advantage of with this amendment is we're also not affecting unassigned fund balance. So it was a way for us to do this, to save money over time and try to still preserve our unassigned fund balance, is kind of how we came to this budget amendment tonight.
Any questions, Commissioner Harris?
Okay, so the interest rates are what, 7% or 8%?
So the way the interest rates work, they don't tell us what the interest rate's going to be until the day that vehicle is delivered. So for example, I can only look at the last vehicle we got, the most recent, and that was 7.71%. The interest rates are based on, I think it's the 3-month Treasury note or Treasury T-bill, and then they have a markup on top of that. So also, as you would imagine, they're in this to make money. So if that Treasury note were to go to zero, they have a floor. In that contract, that floor is somewhere around 3 or 4%. So even if that Treasury note were to go to zero, our interest rate is not zero. Their floor is about 3 or 4%. So that's the minimum interest we're going to pay. I would anticipate the vehicles we're getting this year, that interest rate to be in the 8 to 9% range, just based on what the Fed is doing with interest rates and what the 3-month Treasury bill is bringing in.
Well, I mean, I see, why we should do it. My question is, all the lease vehicles we have right now, when are those contracts up? Do we have to carry them out for the 4 years?
We could choose to buy them out if we wanted to. That would take more money than that is in this amendment tonight. I do know we have approximately 26
Yes, sir, that's
coming
correct.
off next year, just from the sheriff's line. Coming off next year, I believe those vehicles were leased in 2019.
Correct.
From what I've heard from the sheriff's office, I do anticipate the sheriff's office purchasing those vehicles at the end of the lease. Now, we'll add one thing that we also have in the lease on top of interest is every month we pay a management fee. And every month we pay, or at the end of every lease, we pay a $400 fee to buy these vehicles on top of the interest we've already paid. So we would be saving that as well. Also, we do pay interest on that $400 fee over the life of the lease on top of the $400, so we would be saving that as well. So the amount I gave you to save would be a very conservative amount to save, I believe.
Also, if we have a vehicle totaled, it's on the lease program, we lose that vehicle.
One thing else I'll mention, just kicking this around with Michael and also with the mayor, is one thing that we've done, as y'all are well aware, with the school system on our maintenance, we have set aside a number of pennies to cover maintenance year after year. And I personally think the mayor, he can speak for himself, I believe he thinks the same way. It might be a good idea for us to entertain doing this for the sheriff's department on vehicles. For instance, thank you. I think, what did we say, 1.8 million?
Currently, right now, for the sheriff's lease budget to start the year was a little over $1.8 million. That's a little over, I think the penny's bringing in last year about 1.4 million. So I don't know what the penny will bring in this year. So it's a little over a penny. And I think we talked to the sheriff's office, and our plan would be to continue that amount, but not paying the interest costs. So, that way they could continue to buy vehicles every year on a schedule, but we would be saving money on the lease cost. I mean, even if we save $150,000 a year, that's two more vehicles we could pay, rough math there.
Well, excuse me, go ahead, Commissioner.
So if a leased vehicle breaks down, you said they just take the vehicle? They don't repair it or anything? They just take it?
If it's broke down, we repair it, but if it's totaled, we don't get the check like we do if we purchase the vehicle, we own it.
So we pay the repairs on these cars, so we're not going to lose that. That's okay. I get it. Because I was worried about the repairs.
No, if the repairs were covered by the lease company, that would change and like I said, if we were getting a new vehicle every 2 years, that would change the conversation, but the sheriff's office needs these vehicles, so they can't, just lose that 30 at the end of the lease. They have to buy them to filter out, I don't want to speak for the sheriff's office, but to filter out some of their older vehicles that their SROs and maybe judicial officers are using.
Yes, sir, and that's what we do with our vehicles. When they get high mileage, we pass them down to the divisions that don't run emergency traffic anymore or drive as much. We get the best out of our vehicles before we retire them.
one other thing, and he just mentioned that, and you may have missed it. I missed it first time through. I think the sheriff, how many cars did we total? 8?
Yes, sir.
8. Well, those 8 cars, they're done. We don't have 8 vehicles. And if he needs more vehicle, he's going to have to come back to us to and replace them. So that's another problem with the, that's kind of sprung up that we didn't anticipate. Commissioner Gooch.
I guess I wasn't aware of paying interest on leased vehicles. What are we financing to be paying interest?
Did you ask what we're financing? You're financing the vehicle over, for, in most cases, 48 months. Some are 60 months leases. So, I mean, you're financing I'm using a round number here, let's take a $40,000 vehicle minus the salvage value or residual value. You're financing that cost over 4 to 5 years. And then at the end, we have an option to purchase that vehicle if we would like, or it would go back to the rental company if we don't purchase it. So it's no different than us going down the street to buy a car if we wanted to.
So, I guess I'm just ignorant. So, when you're leasing a car, you're still financing it?
In our
the
case,
lease payment doesn't pay for the car?
well, there's a portion of that goes to principal every month, and then a portion will go to interest. So this is a vehicle that we bought a few years ago. For example, the payment's $1,100 or $1,166 a month. $838, and I'm rounding the cents off, $838 goes to principal, and $328 goes to interest and management fees.
But we're not buying the car, we're leasing it.
Correct. That's how they're making money.
If I rent a house, I'm paying rent, I'm not.
Commissioner, this is why it's a bad deal. This is a bad deal, and when I first became aware of the enterprise lease agreement, I think end of September, 1st of October, I went to Michael and I said, I'm missing something here, and Michael informed me that I was missing nothing. And then I contacted Commissioner P. And so I think the best way forward for us with a county with an $800 million budget and a AAA bond rating is quit financing vehicles like a county that is having difficulty balancing its budget.
So you're going to be looking at all areas, all departments on what
Yes,
we're looking
yes, sir, absolutely. And to Chairman P's point, I think it'd be extremely wise for us to put away a certain amount of money in each department's budget for replacement vehicles. That goes into the budget going forward. Now, that may take 2 or 3 budget cycles, but I think the best place for us to start is the Sheriff's Department because they have the largest number of vehicles.
Let me clarify, that $12,000 a month in interest I told you we were paying is over all of our lease vehicles. The majority of those are the sheriff's, but that's our lease program as a whole, just to clarify.
Commissioner
So
Harris.
when we buy a vehicle, lease a vehicle, we had to do all kind of stuff to it. We had to put lights on it. We had to do all that. So do they pay to do that?
No,
Or we pay?
we pay that, and we own that equipment in there. So when we pay for a radio, as an example, to go in a leased vehicle, we pay that cost up front. So, for example, I think we took delivery today of a couple of patrol vehicles.
Yes.
So we would pay $10,000 to $12,000 up front to Enterprise before the lease even starts to equip that vehicle. Now, that equipment in there is ours, but we pay that up front to Enterprise as part of that agreement.
So basically, we're paying to put all this stuff on a car. We had to end up buying the car, right? I mean, there's no turning it in. We end up having to purchase these cars anyway. Is that correct?
I can't speak for the sheriff's office, but yes.
That's correct. We got so much invested in that car, and we need the car to pass down to get the high mileage cars off the streets.
We keeping the car
Yes, sir.
after the lease.
Yes, sir.
Some of the things that they're putting on those cars can be transferred to a new vehicle, but most of those are older. And then I think they're short on probably some of them too, and that's why Michael was basically telling me vehicle costs that we hadn't spit that out, but if you just went off and bought a vehicle, $45,000 to $50,000, depending on the actual vehicle, but then you got another 20. So these vehicles are about $70,000 a piece. I'll give you an idea of what you're purchasing there. And we've got a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Irvin.
Oh, I would just like to say this is a very good idea. from my perspective, and I want to commend the initiative and the analysis on the part of Sheriff's Office, Finance Director, and the Mayor that went into this. I mean, this is a very good idea. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Phillips?
Just, when we started the lease program 3 or 4 years ago, so when it was 3 or 4 years ago, leasing seemed to be the great deal. The bottom line was that leasing would save the county money, and now I'm hearing something totally different than that. So the bottom line in purchasing a vehicle and leasing a vehicle, as far as the money that we pay, what is that bottom line? Michael, do you know? Like if we ended up paying $50,000 for a lease vehicle and $60,000, $70,000 for purchasing a vehicle, those were some of the numbers that I remember us talking about several years ago. Leasing was the good deal, and I think that's what Commissioner Gooch was saying as well, that when we went through all of this, we were saving a ton of money long term by leasing vehicles instead of buying those vehicles.
Well, so initially, let's say that we leased a sheriff's patrol. I'm going to use a Ford Explorer because that's kind of what we're talking about here. Let's say you do lease that vehicle, and over the life of that lease, it costs, I'm using a round number here because I don't have numbers in front of me, but let's say that vehicle costs, you know, to lease $45,000 interest and all. You know, that's what we're going to pay Enterprise over the 4 years. And maybe it costs $55,000 for us to go buy that vehicle. You know, so it's a little more. However, that's why I said the analysis will be different if we did not have to buy these vehicles at the end of the lease, because they don't come to us for free at the end of the lease. We're spending whatever that value is. That could be $20,000 at the end of the lease, depending on the vehicle. It could be 10, could be 35, depending on the vehicle. So you have to add that in to factor in when you're looking at it as a whole about what's going to save the county money. Like I said, it'd be totally different if you're a farmer who gets a brand new tractor every year, because a lot of farmers do that with their tractors or hay balers and stuff like that. I think that changes the analysis. But from what I'm hearing from the sheriff's office, they need to keep these 30 lease vehicles they're leasing every year because they need them. And so I think then you have to put in there that balloon payment at the end has to go into the factor of the lease purchase analysis.
Part of the discussion, too, remembering back, was availability. You know, at the time, they had the vehicles for us, so that was another thing that we looked at. But any other questions? No, we've got a motion and a second. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Srinion?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Okay, you've got one more item.
Yes, sir. This amendment is to correct the pay and classification of a payroll position, requesting to move $3,780 from other salaries and wages and place it into the sheriff's accounts and bookkeeping line item.
This is a issue that the sheriff gave me a call and we talked about. Also, Chairman Reed discussed this with him too. So we have an employee who's doing the exact same job as another employee, and that's the difference in the pay. And we missed it in the bookkeeping. We weren't aware that person was actually doing the same job. So that's why we're not going back pay, but basically we're trying to right a wrong here. Any questions for Mr. Spence? Hearing none, call roll, please.
I don't have a motion.
I'm sorry, I thought I had motion on that.
I so move.
I didn't hear the first.
I got it.
Marino, okay.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Srinion?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris? Yes. Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Spence. Okay, that gets us into number 10, General Fund Budget Amendment for the Agricultural Extension Department. Mr. Tuggle, it's been a while since I've seen you. Welcome.
Try not to come up here too often. Try to stay on the west side of the interstate. Good afternoon, everyone. What I'm requesting is to remove $47,000 from the committed ag line to line 499 to do several projects we have listed on your sheets. We do a quarterly cleaning, a detailed cleaning at our facility because it's rented so much. For the auditorium and weather concessions. Also, we need to upgrade our wireless mic system in the community center, redo our parking lot based on the maintenance department to kind of keep that from going too bad. Also some things for our mower, gator, tractor, and also we have some damaged installation in the back of the livestock barn we want to get repaired, and also we want to redo our fencing around the horse arena. We've had a couple of quotes on that, but we hadn't went through the official bid process on getting those done. And also we fix our Big A fans in the community center. And that's basically reducing that committed line $47,000 and putting in the supply line to do those extra projects we want to get done this year.
Yeah, you've heard the request. This is not any new money being requested. This is out of his budget. Do I hear a motion or a second or a question?
Motion to approve.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
The reason I'm making that motion, that facility is used nearly on a daily basis, and it stands a lot of wear and tear.
There's a lot of good use for our community there. Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Srinial?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch? Yes. Commissioner Harris? Yes. Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you all.
President.
Have a good day.
Okay, we're going to speed things along here and defer items 11, 12, and 13. We don't have the information that we need to go ahead with those today is the reasoning. So we're going to item 14, a presentation of the debt service fund, cash flow, and debt management policy for the 3-star program. And Mr. Smith.
So this is what we do yearly as part of submitting our information for the 3-star program. I do not believe this requires a vote. It is, we're required to give y'all information about it. As you'll see in there, it does have a cash flow statement. It does have our debt management policies in there. But my understanding is it does not require a vote. It just requires us to present it to y'all. Like I said, we do this every year. This also allows us to be eligible for certain community development block grants that we receive. So I'll take any questions if there are any.
Give you a moment to look at that.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm not mistaken, this goes before the full commission as well.
It will, and then it'll be on the committee report just so that it'll be segregated in the minutes.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move to item 15, the Governor's Direct Appropriation Grant Authorized Expenditures.
So this is not going to be any new money. This is to expand the scope of something that was previously passed by this body and the commission. Previously, we received COVID money through the Governor's 21 Direct Appropriation. The commission approved some money for the remodel of the 3rd floor of the courthouse. There were some materials ordered for the 1st and 2nd floor previously that were ordered. I believe they were blinds for all 3 floors of the courthouse. So this amendment would expand. There's already money there, but this amendment would expand the scope of that previous resolution authorizing the 3rd floor. This would expand it to the 1st and 2nd floor for the blinds that were already ordered and purchased and installed.
Any questions from the committee? So this is money that we've got in the Gov 21 and cover what we've already spent.
Motion to approve.
A motion, I hear a second.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion, Commissioner Irvin?
Could you clarify exactly what we're approving?
So the previous commission approved money for the 3rd floor renovation. And as part of that 3rd floor renovation, the previous administration ordered blinds for more than just the 3rd floor. They ordered blinds for the entire courthouse, for the 1st and 2nd floor and the 3rd floor. So for us to pay this bill correctly, we need this body and the commission to expand the scope of that money to allow the finance department to pay that, or we will need to move the expense into another line item, which we can do if this does not get approved.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any other questions? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Sereno?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris? Yes. Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, item 16, discussion of the public health and safety buildings funding. I don't know who wants to take the lead on this one.
You want me to take it? So this was before this committee last month, and this committee sent this back to public safety, and public safety has now sent this back to budget. And how this originally came to this body is we were short money for Las Casas and Walter Hill and the next two public health and safety buildings. We were short about $1.4 million each between the two. And I anticipate we will be short at least that much on Christiana, which will be number 5. So public safety sent back to budget to use money from the Dale Webb building to fund essentially the remaining 3. So you would have 5 fully funded buildings. And then we would have to come up with funding for the 6th building, being the Dale Webb building in the future at a later date. So there would be some options to fund that. That would be up to this body and the commission. I believe Commissioner Phillips has equated it to school projects, how sometimes we approve school projects before funding is in place. But that's what public safety has sent back to this committee. It doesn't really require a budget amendment, but it will require this committee to send it to commission to allow us to change the budgets for those projects.
You've heard that discussion. Commissioner Sereno, you're on public safety, so you've heard this before, I know. Mr. Gooch, I think you've had a question.
Well, so it's 1.4 million each, so that's 2.8 million? And is all of it coming from the Dale Webb?
Okay, that's the short answer. The 50,000-foot view is yes. However, because these are federal funds, essentially what we're going to end up doing is moving funding from the Christiana building to Las Casas and Walter Hill, and Dale Webb money will shift to Christiana because the Dale Webb building is being funded out of 171. The other ones are being funded out of our ARPA fund 127. But to answer your question, yes.
And does that leave? What does that leave still in the Dale Webb fund?
I've got it. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Let me flip to that page. It's close to that. I just want to give you the exact number. So if we, taking out the 2.8 million, that would bring the funding for Dale Webb down to 4,617,268. I would anticipate Christiana also coming in over budget. I think 1.4, it may be more than that, depending on how interest rates and construction costs go. So if you were to go ahead and subtract out that number, that would leave you with $3,217,268 remaining for Dale Webb.
So currently it's 4 point what?
So the current budget for Dale Webb today, as we speak, before we move any money, is $7,417,268.
So right now that's leaving 4 point what million?
That would leave $4,617,268.
Thank you.
For Dale Webb. But I will add, if we want to do Christiana, I would anticipate that would be our only solution to go ahead and do that. Depending on what we would do with any future debt or funding issues for Dale Webb.
Any other questions from the committee?
Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Mayor?
If I could, the fact that we're moving these funds from Del Webb through Christiana and then to Walter Hill and Lascassas and ultimately Christiana, in my mind, doesn't jeopardize Del Webb. I think Commissioner Phillips adequately summarized it in the last meeting when he said, you know, all we're doing is we're just shifting money around from building projects to building projects until we get to the end to find out what do we need to finish off the last project, and Del Webb happens to be the last project. It's my anticipation we'll complete that project. We just want to know what our options are for finishing the funding of that last project. I don't expect it, nor do I anticipate it to be delayed because of this process.
Chairman Harris.
So let me see if I understand this. So we're taking money from the Del Webb, and we are guaranteeing we're going to finish the other 5. Is that correct? Okay. So, Mayor, are you asking for this Del Webb deficit in your next budget? Us to begin construction on that? Are you holding off on that?
Well, it was always my understanding, Commissioner, that Lascassas and Walter Hill would begin the spring of this year, and then Christiana and Del Webb would begin no later than the spring of next year. So that 12-month period gives us some flexibility to find out how do we backfill that funding deficit that has now occurred in Del Webb as a result of moving those funds forward to Walter Hill, Lascassas, and Christiana. So it just gives us some time to find out what our funding options are, if that makes any sense.
We're not necessarily had to go full-blown on this budget.
Oh, no.
We could backtail this on the other budget
again,
in 2 years, 24 months?
At the most. Again, now that is, in my understanding, Commissioner, may be somewhat in error here, but it was always my understanding that the first 2 were Rockville and Kittrell, the next 2 were Lascassas and Walter Hill, and the last 2 were Christiana and Del Webb. And it was basically they were in 1-year intervals. That was my understanding. Now, if I'm incorrect there, somebody please correct me, but that's what I've been going on, which is why 2 reasons. One of the reasons why Del Webb was chosen, because it wasn't A, ARPA money, it was being funded internally, and 2, it was the 6th public safety building to be constructed. So it buys us some time to how to, again, backfill that funding. It gives us about a year to figure that out. So we don't have to do that in this budget year, if that makes sense, this budget year coming up.
I'm concerned with this budget, so that's what
it should not impact this budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I've got a comment I want to make.
Let me clarify. It will not impact this budget year unless this body were to decide, for example, if you wanted to piggyback off a future bond issue from the school to fund this in the spring, you could definitely do that. Or you could borrow next year. You could do something with tax dollars next year. There's several options. But if you did decide this year to tack on to a school debt issuance or something, a small portion, it would affect a small portion of this budget year, yes.
And to be clear, that is one of the options that we were looking at. We were wanting to wait at least a couple, 3 months when this body was prepared to issue a bond for the schools. We know we have that decision in front of us. And so we were going to, at the appropriate time, come back to this body and say, okay, we have this as an option. If you want to exercise this option now, or do you want to defer the option to later? But until we got to the point of discussing the school bond issue, it just seemed premature to lay that out as an option until we got to that point where it was a relevant discussion. So that's what Michael's saying is exactly correct. That is one of the potential options.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, I've got a couple. Approximately $5 million is what we'll have to come up with to do the Del Webb. That's just guessing, saying $8 million, and then you said 3 something. 3.2. So just roughly $5 million. Since we're building a fire station, does that have to be SIDUS money?
These stations being not just a fire station, these stations are really an emergency operation building. If my understanding is they'll have room for the sheriff to operate, multitude of things. The Citus money, no for that. I've looked into that because they're really used for rescue. They're used as a command post for an incident in that area. So the answer is no there for that. Now, as far as staffing, then yes, depending on how this body wanted to staff those buildings, then the answer is yes, Citus money does come into play there.
Do we have enough Citus money to staff these buildings?
I don't. If my math is correct, because I understand it, Walter Hill is already staffed, but that would still leave 3 of the remaining unstaffed. Right now, I would have to say no until we did more research, because I think that would be about, if we did 15 people per station, that's 45 people. So that my answer would be no if you asked me tonight.
Well, here's my point. Before we put brick and mortar up for a building that's going to sit empty, I want to make sure we've got the funding process in place for the manpower. I agree with that. You know, there's discussion to do away with the volunteer department out of Kittrell and man it with paid firefighters. Commissioner Gooch, you were on our budget, and I know Commissioner Allen at the time asked, well, we got the money through the grant to build these, but how are we going to man them? I emphatically said, well, our volunteers will man these. Well, if there's a change in direction there, you're going to have to come up with the money. Anybody on the commission got a question there? Now, one thing else I'll say, we are growing, and as we grow, our Citus money grows, and I know of a couple ways that we can expand our Citus money. We'll get into that. I don't want to go into it tonight, but there are possibilities there. Now, I saw about 3 mics get waved. I'm going to start on the far end, and we'll get to you, Mr. Phillips.
Had Mr. Farley put in for a grant for 2 years of money for 15 firefighters? Of course, I'm very aware that after 2 years that plays out, but has he not put in for that? And have we extinguished our grant money that we have got prior to this for firefighter pay?
I'll turn to Michael on that as far as the money goes.
I will have to check. Mark, do you know if we've used all of our grant money for that? For some reason, I'm thinking it went away, but I'm not sure.
Not right off the top of my head, no.
I'd have to get back to you on if we've expended all of that. But to get back to Commissioner P's question, if we did additional on top of what we have now, our Citus money will continue to grow, I anticipate. So I can't give a firm answer whether, 2 years from now, we're going to have enough Citus money to hire an additional 45. I don't know. If you ask me today, I can tell you we don't have enough Citus money as it stands today. I don't believe to hire them today, but I mean, our Citus money could definitely grow, and there are some options out there to fund that. But I will have to look and get you the information on that grant to see if there's any left, and if so, how long that will carry us.
Mr. Harris, you were next in line.
So, just doing my numbers, 15 firemen equal $1 million. Would that be about right?
That's got to be awful close off the top of my head, yes.
So, help me out here because I don't know the answer to this. So if we got to fund these 4 units, and that's 3 units, that's $3 million. So if we get into a shortfall, are we able to use the Del Webb balance to help pay for this?
What do you want to use the remaining Del Webb balance for?
And if we had a shortfall and we have 3 units or 3 buildings that's coming up, that's 15 per building, that's $3 million.
So the Del Webb money is sitting in our general capital projects fund. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
It's fine.
I will have to look into that. Now, keep in mind, I do want to keep in mind, that's a one-time money in there. Once, with it being in the capital projects fund, if you were to spend that, it's gone. So it's not reoccurring money.
But the nature of your question, Commissioner, is for contingency in case of an emergency. Would that be accurate? Yes. Okay.
I'm just making sure that once we open these things,
we got to have a plan B.
once we open these things, we got to staff them. And if we don't, we got to have, that's $3 million. And I'm just saying, if we're in a situation where it's a deficit, or you know what I'm talking about,
I cannot
we could use that Del Webb money towards that to keep from having to
I cannot spend it in the current form that it's in the capital projects fund. I don't know if I'm allowed to move it back for that purpose.
Okay.
There were a lot of stipulations on there, and we'll find out. My guess is the answer to that would be no. That's my guess, but I think Lisa could probably help us with that.
I think
That money ended up being revenue loss.
Yeah, I think those funds are revenue
So I
loss funds,
think
so
you
those are
Probably could
unassigned
move it
funds.
back.
Yeah.
But
those
I
are
want to
unassigned.
double check before I tell you 100%.
Mr. or Chairman Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The discussion at Public Safety led to comparisons with the Board of Education. When we build buildings, we have to staff those buildings. It's the exact same thing here. If you build the buildings, you got to staff them. It costs somewhere around $3.5 million, and I think that's gone up a little bit, but $3.5 million to staff, and that's a reoccurring expense to staff a high school. So where does that come from? It comes from the taxpayers. Some of it comes from the state, I know, but a lot of it comes from the taxpayers. And it's the exact same. We're funding our public safety department. And 15 years ago, 18 years ago, help me, Chairman Reed, 15, 18 years ago, when we started the process of funding a fire department, we knew that this was the process that we would be going through. As we grew, we would expand that, and this is part of that expansion. It is the cost of growth. So if you build it, you got to staff it. Just like building a school. If you build it, you got to staff it, and that's the additional cost. It is expected and anticipated, and that's the comparison that we had at Public Safety. Is that pretty much correct, Chairman Reed? Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, we can't just say a bond issue to, and the way I understand it, we can't just say, here's a bond issue, we're going to borrow money or have money in our general fund to pay these wages. It has to come out of the sales tax money, okay? We've got to have enough of that, to my understanding, to be able to pay for these. Yes, we could probably afford it through our general fund, but we don't have the sales tax dollars, to my knowledge, right now. Like I said, I know of a couple of ways that we can expand our sales tax, and I think as we have, just as we've been doing, we've been growing our fire department. But part of the reason we've done it the way we've done it is so we could afford it and have the sales tax money to do it and pay for it as it goes along. You know, you take Kittrell, for instance. You know, if you go back in 1990 when we started there, let's see, that's about 22 years now, so about $1 million a year on this kind of cost. It's about 20 million, give or take a few million there, that volunteer department has given you. Now, you want to go ahead and do away with the volunteer departments that have been saving you that money. You know, that's our decision to make here. I personally disagree with it, besides it being in my district. Two, I don't think that public safety bothered to talk to the board out at Kittrell to ask them what they thought. You know, they've been partnering and they've been funding this department for our county and doing mutual aid all over this county for 20-something years, which we didn't bother to go and talk to the board. I don't even know that they've talked to the fire chief out there. No, they didn't ask me. I think they probably knew what the answer would have been. But I think that, you know, we're kind of cutting our nose off to spite our face. And one reason I say talk to our board out there at Kittrell, these guys don't just take money from us. They also make money themselves through fundraising, and they buy trucks that they use all over the county. You know, our tanker out there, I think, was around $400,000. The county didn't pay for that. The county's getting the use of it. You know, how much financing have they got left to pay that off? I don't think anybody from public safety bothered to ask them. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about it. I just wanted to point out that that funding may not be in place to man these stations, and you go ahead and build them, and you're going to have some empty stations sitting there, and you're going to look a little bit peculiar to building an empty station.
If I may, it's the position of the office of the mayor that we won't build an empty fire station. We either will build it and staff it, or we won't build it. And if this body wants to have a different opinion on that, that would be a great debate to have. But that's the position of the office of the mayor. It's foolish. Here we were talking about, not just 30 minutes ago, about enterprise leases and talking about saving $250,000, which is a lot of money. But now we're talking about building fire stations, public safety buildings, and not staffing them. Gentlemen, I think that's a completely untenable position for us to be in. So if we're going to build it, we'll staff it.
Thank you, Mayor. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And one thing else I want to say about this, I pushed and worked very hard to get a Rutherford County Fire Department, a paid department. And I support them. I have supported them more than any commissioner sitting in here. I promise you. You go back and look at the votes. Many of you older commissioners know how hard it was to get that department started. But I was one of the reasons that we got that. And I'm one of the reasons I want to keep expanding that. One of my dreams when I became a commissioner here, people talk about what they're passionate about. Well, you hit my button with fire and safety, okay? We need desperately to have ambulance stations further out in the rural areas. Las Casas, for instance, Kittrell, for instance. You know, we've waited 24 years. I've been wanting a station out at Kittrell for 24 years. We didn't need the fire station. We needed the ambulance station. Okay, you that live in the municipalities, you know, especially if you're over on Greenland, you know, you can probably yell real loud, and that station over at MTSU would hear you, and you come right on over. You know, you do that out at Kittrell, and you may get one in 20, 30 minutes. You may get lucky and there's nobody there at the MTSU station. They can buzz right on out and pick you up in 5 or 10 minutes, depending on where you're at. So that's something I've worked hard for, and I'm not trying to say, let's not do this. You know, when we brought up the 5th and 6th station, I knew we were running close on the money. And some of you may remember, I said, hey, be careful how you're spending this money. We're going to be running out of it. And I voted for this. And the reason I did is it right for me to say, yeah, I want a station out here at Kittrell, but I'm going to dog and major, and you're not getting one over here at Amival or Christiana. You know, it's not right. So I just want you to know that I am not anti-building these stations. I want to build them, but we have got things we have to do by law to build them and man them.
Mr. Chairman, one more comment, if I may. So the issue with the public safety buildings and staffing those with full-time professional firefighters is just one example of the growth that this county and other counties in Tennessee are experiencing. I've said this 1,000 times, but I'll repeat myself. People from all over the country are moving here. We have serious growth. And this body asked me to help solve a large problem. I spent the whole day in Jackson, Tennessee today addressing the West Tennessee County Mayors Association and the West Tennessee delegation talking about this very thing. How do counties get on par with our cities so we can fund the growth that the cities are able to fund? And so that is one of many options I hope that this body will have at its disposal to make a determination about how we fund for growth, because that's what this is. This is funding for growth. And this is just one example. And Mr. Chairman, I really believe we're going to get there. But I'll tell you, if we can't man them, we shouldn't build them. But I do believe we're on a path to be able to build and man these public safety buildings with a professional service that these communities want and deserve. And so we'll see what happens. I'll know a whole lot more by the end of April, as you will. But that's what you charged me to do, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, thank you.
I appreciate that. By the way, the next thing we're going to discuss is money shortages on another building.
I have a comment on that subject before
Mr.
you leave it. The volunteer firefighters through this conversation right here has been portrayed as if we are going to throw them in the trash can and do away with them. The idea of this is to let them stay on where they are and assist, the way I have understood this, in the best way they can. The questions and comments that's been made right here on these fire stations should have been talked about 2 years ago when we started agreeing to build one at Rockvale, one at Kittrell, one at Las Casas, and so on. My opinion, we're a little late on this conversation. The money's done been spent for drawings, design, land has been bought where we had to have some land for other entrances. You just will us to bow up, build the buildings, and staff them. We're going to have them. Rutherford County is growing in leaps and bounds. Everybody that lives in it knows that. We'll probably be building another school or two within the next year or so. It'll never be questioned. $70, $80 million, never be questioned. It'll go right through. Nobody will ever say anything about it. These public safety buildings, the people that don't have children in school anymore, your grandparents, your older people, this is one way they can get something back out of their tax dollars they're having to pay every year. I'm fully for it, and I think we should move forward with this right here.
Well, Mayor, do you want a vote on this as far as using the money from Del Webb? Do we need a motion for that to go to the full commission?
We need a motion to increase that, yes.
We do.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I mean, we're going to...
We got kind of lost in the weeds here for a minute.
Well, I'm going to tell you about budget, and I've mentioned it to you once. There may be things that you disagree with, and they get passed. Well, guess what? You're still charged with figuring out how to pay for it, whether you like it or not. That's your job, okay? Now, this particular one happens to be one for me as far as the Manning portion goes. But having said that, I will entertain a motion that we take the money from the Del Webb building and use it to finish the other 3 buildings. Is that correct, Michael?
Well, what I would like to do is what's on your iPads talks about moving 1.3 million each. That really needs to be 1.4 million, so it doesn't have to come back here because there's some FF&E and stuff in there. So if we could have a motion to increase the budgets for the Las Casas and Walter Hills by $1.4 million, that'll authorize the PBA to increase that amount. And if you would like to go ahead and include Christiana, you can. If you want to wait until that bid comes in, because we haven't got that quote in yet.
I would recommend we wait.
So we probably need to wait on that. Let's just go ahead and approve an addition to the budget to Las Casas and Walter Hill of $1.4 million each, coming from the Del Webb funding.
Okay, you've heard the request. You making the motion, Commissioner Harris?
We got to get stuff built. I mean, we have got to get stuff built. And so I'm going to make the motion to approve this and get to where, as far as Christiana goes, we'll get there. I don't want to vote on something that we don't even have the prices in, so that's not a smart thing. But I do make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we approve this from the Del Webb and to fund these shorts.
So that's 1.4 for each of the 2
piece.
buildings.
So for a 2.8 million total, but 1.4 per to increase the budgets of both of those.
So that is your motion? Yes, sir. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Johnson, second.
I have a comment too also. We have a moral obligation to the citizens of this county, and we need to step up to the plate.
Any other discussion? Call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Srinion?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, item 17, discussion of the one-stop building funding. Now, I don't have any information on this, and Mayor was sitting in with the PBA, so I'm gonna look at him and tell us what's going on.
Best for last, right, Mr. Chairman? So, gentlemen, I've been working on this with the chairman of PBA, Stan Vaught, Brick Reed, Nick Christensen, Michael Smith. The bottom line is One Stop is short a little over $1 million. And the big part of that is, and we can crawl off into the weeds if you like, and I'll be glad to do that. I mean, and then Michael has got the numbers, and we can walk through the numbers and spend the rest of the evening doing that. The bottom line is the contractor did a poor job of estimating. It was a confluence of a number of events at one time. It truly was. The contractor did a poor job of estimating. His estimator left in the middle of the contract. We had significant price increases and labor problems. And when I got here in September, I was informed literally the day after I got here that we had a significant problem, and completing One Stop was in jeopardy. And here we were 2/3 of the way through the project, and we've got a bit of a crisis with funding and completion. So over the last 3 months, Nick Christensen, Brick Murphy, myself, Michael Smith, and Stan Vaught and the PBA have been working with Rock City to find an agreement to hold them both accountable for a large part of this, or a significant part of this, while at the same time getting us the deliverable that we were promised. And so we've got a worked up agreement that literally is not signed. The agreement that we have come to with Rock City is before the Rock City attorney, and we're now literally down to the details. The numbers won't change, but they're just down to the wording that won't have any impact on the agreement. And so the PBA has passed tonight this agreement. They've sent it over to budget for our approval, which would then go to County Commission on the 12th. It will not come before the County Commission without Rock City signatures. So if the Rock City, for whatever reason, doesn't have a signed agreement by noon Wednesday, is that right, Michael? And by noon Wednesday, then it won't come before the full body. But it is, regretfully, it is my recommendation that we proceed with this agreement so we can get this facility done. And I'll be glad to take questions, and I'll be asking Mr. Smith's help.
So what, as the mayor stated, this project is over budget, a little over $1 million. So what you would be voting on tonight would be a general fund budget amendment. The county's portion of that would be $680,393. Now, I'm going to propose that if you wish to pass this budget amendment, I'm going to propose that money come out of our restricted for capital projects money in the general fund, and that to be transferred to our capital projects fund, and authorize the PBA to spend an additional $680,393 to that project from the county's portion.
Chairman P., it's, Mayor, I'm in this business, so I understand it. And I'm just asking, is the PBA feel confident that this is the last you need to come to us on, or do they anticipate even more?
On this project, Mr.
This project.
So thank you for asking that question, because that's the very first question that I asked, because as a matter of fact, that in some sense that extended this process, because I made it very clear to Rock City, extremely clear to Rock City and PBA. I said, this next number you come up with is the last number. There is no other number after this one. And so I think, and they got the message. And I want to give a lot of credit to Brick Murphy and Nick Christensen and Michael, because we all were in agreement in that sentiment. So I have a lot of confidence this is the final number. I will never make a promise, but I have a high degree of confidence that is, because if it isn't, then we're going to pull the plug. Okay, that would be my recommendation, because just to be candid, gentlemen, Rutherford County taxpayers are bearing the burden of a mistake that a contractor made. Now, there were some circumstances here. He had a contractor walk out on him, okay, after submitting, I think it was the electrical contractor, wasn't it? Was it? Correct. It was the electrical contractor submitted his bid and then walked out. He got a replacement, and that added about $100,000 to the job right out of the gate. I mean, this is before I got here. And so then we had some, as an example, we had some additional excavation costs because there was some subterranean rock that wasn't found in the geotechnical survey, that geotechnical work that was done. We found out that what wasn't included in his big package was the DMV, the state DMV part of this, which I think is about $140,000. So
that's the overage of it.
That's the overage, thank you. So, I mean, so it was literally a cascading of events, and we can certainly go through each and every one of these tonight if you want. I'm glad to do that because there are about 8 different significant items that lead to these numbers. But I know we have a significant need to get this done. It's not in the interest of the county to go to court and litigate this thing. That is not in the interest of the county. It's not in the interest of Rock City. So that's why I bring this to you tonight. And again, it's a very regretful situation, and I hate that I inherited it. But we're all going to step up to the plate and do the best for our county, and I think that's what this is.
Huge.
So the county's portion will be $680, $393. What is Rock City's portion?
$326,386.20.
And we are putting in another $25,000 contingency. Is that's
in the number I gave him earlier.
Is that included in that number? Okay, thank you. Never mind.
So just to clarify the numbers, I'll repeat them once. So the entire amount we are over budget is $1,006,778.64. Out of that, the county would be bearing the cost of $680,392.44, which would leave the remaining portion of $326,386.20 to Rock City to fund. That is roughly a 67 to 33% split. Now, how we arrived at those, because I get that question a lot. Some of those costs were when we analyzed the contract, a large portion of that is the DMV portion. That contract was a little different than the one-stop side portion because it's kind of split. So that is one of the reasons that that split is there. Then also part of that number, we're agreeing to refund the contingency up to $35,000. That's part of the number I gave you. That does not mean we will spend that. So if we don't spend that, that will obviously come back to the county. But that's how we arrived at that number. And let me echo, a large portion of that number, roughly $250,000, was due to unforeseen rock from the geotechnical study that the mayor mentioned. And based on meeting with the attorneys, that split is really the biggest difference of why we're paying a little more than Rock City, because there was some gray area in the contract for who was responsible for that unforeseen rock and geotechnical study.
Okay, just one more question, then I'll have a motion. So this is the agreement that we have, and to change those numbers in our favor would mean a lawsuit. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
If we were to walk away from this agreement, I'm not sure how much more effort we can put into this process and improve the county's position without it becoming litigious.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move that we move or transfer $680,393.44 from the restricted capital projects to, what would the
other side of that will be a transfer out, but essentially we're going to authorize the PBA. As part of this budget amendment, we will authorize the PBA to increase their budget for the one-stop building by that $680,393.
And that's my motion.
I have I have a motion. Do I hear a second? Okay, Commissioner Harris, you had your hand up.
Okay, my question, so it's 1,000,006, and you're only wanting us to budget amendment of 680. All right, my question is 326,386. How do we know we're going to get that? Is that going to take coming out of the contract, final contract to them, or
So
how are
part
we getting that?
part of that agreement is they're just not going to bill us for that, if that makes sense. They're going to eat that portion, yes.
Okay.
And I want to, before we take a vote, I want to say something. This goes back to our growth, Commissioner Piercy, that you referenced on an earlier topic. I think at some point in time, the larger body needs to consider looking at the debate of a construction manager, project manager, to help the PBA, because part of the problem that we have is that we have a number of projects in the county. Some are certainly easy, but many are complicated, and as we grow, the projects get a little more complicated. This is an example of that. The PBA does an excellent job, but the fact of the matter is, and Commissioner Harris, you have made mention of this and brought this up in steering, we've got a oversight body in the PBA that has difficulty getting quorum sometimes, and so that causes further delays and problems in managerial oversight. So I think this illustrates we're going through some serious growing pains, but I think this is deserving of a broader conversation about how do we get a handle on the day-to-day operations and oversight of the projects that we've got going on. So I will be bringing that to this body for discussion at a later date, but this illustrates, I think, the need for that. Thank you.
Irving?
It's hard to know exactly where to begin. So we're being asked to increase our portion $680,000, and they may either pay or forego $326,000. We don't know the answer to that. We don't
No, sir, that's not correct. The agreement specifically stipulates that we will pay $680, and they will forego the billing of $326 or something like that.
That's in a contract amendment between the PBA and Rock City. The reason that contract is not before you is because that contract is not between the commission and Rock City. That contract is between the PBA and Rock City, and it specifies that they will eat or not bill us for that $326,000, and then our price is the $680. But part of that $680 is $25,000 of us increasing a contingency of something we may have missed during negotiations. And I do believe, and the mayor can correct me if I'm wrong, that anything above that $25,000, Rock City also agrees.
That's correct.
To eat or take. That was part of our negotiations.
But if we do not have a signed agreement, we being the county, we don't have a signed agreement by noon on Wednesday, we're done. So, because this has to come back before, we're not going to bring this before the full body on Thursday without signatures.
Well, we don't have a signed agreement today.
No, we do not, because their lawyers on both sides are literally working out the last details. We got an approval in concept on the numbers, which is where we spent obviously the bulk of our time, Commissioner, is on making sure we got the numbers right. And so now and that happened literally just a few hours ago. And so there just wasn't time to put the rest of it together in advance of the PBA. But I wanted to bring it here because there are other things that are being held up as a result of this process. So we're trying to expedite it, but we're not rushing it. That's why if we don't have a signed agreement on Wednesday for you to look at, it won't matter.
So, and the holdup is the attorneys, basically?
Yes, sir. Well, they're not holding up. They're working, believe me, they're working hard and diligently, but it takes time.
Both attorneys agreed to the numbers, even a little bit before today. Yeah. There was some legal language in there that I think they were working out, but we've heard from both sides that they both agree on the numbers, is my understanding.
That's correct.
Okay, so the choice is to approve this, or it gets flushed at the end of, if we don't have a signed contract, or what if the folks don't, what if they don't step up to the plate, fund their 326? What if there are other issues that come up that, because
if they don't fund their 326, then maybe Mr. Smith can tell us how many invoices he has that still are not paid. So the county is not without leverage.
We do currently withhold 5% retainage on this project as well. I can't speak for the mayor's office or for legal counsel, but I would assume that would be in violation of this agreement. Currently, they're in violation of their current agreement with the PBA, so I would anticipate a litigation outcome. But I'm not an attorney, but I will tell you we do have some leverage. We do have some invoices we're holding, and we do have retainage that we're sitting on as well.
Are we certain that there are no other issues that if we enter into an agreement, then you're talking about litigation on top of litigation, potentially? I'm trying to sort out, do we have all the answers at this point? I mean, we as a committee, and I don't know if the commission will have the data, we don't have hardly any data at this point. I mean, I'm trying to get my head around
I understand that, and I will say this.
Process, because at this point, I mean, the PBAs, and nobody's from the PBA is here, and I respect and I admire, in a sense, y'all's willingness to go through this process, but heck, nobody from the PBA is here trying to explain to us, you know, basically why there's an overrun, and I get what y'all are saying, but why, you know, we're having to go through this drill about, you know, coming up with a contract that we don't have, financial worksheet that we don't have that outlines all of this, and now we're being asked to make a decision without data, okay, without a contract. That's a hurdle.
It is a big lift, and I will tell you the reason you don't have the data, Commissioner, is because I don't have the data. When I get the data, you get the data that you're talking about. The point I'm making is I have a high degree of confidence in the attorneys that are assisting the county in this. I just do. I trust them. I trust them like I trust Michael. I just do. And they're telling me this is the best deal we can get. It's not a good deal for either side, but it's the best we can get if we want to finish the project. And the fact of the matter is, if you vote yes tonight to move this to full commission, you have the full authority to vote no on Thursday night. And so you're not without recourse to change your mind. And so, you know, hopefully what I will do is, if we get signatures by Wednesday, I'll make sure that somebody from the PBA is here. I'll make sure that Brick Murphy's here. I'll make sure that Nick Christensen's here. We'll get all the people here necessary so we can drill down, as long as you want that in. You're right, because this is a very important issue. And I am in no way trying to push this through. But what I am trying to do is act on the best interest of the county. And again, just because it leaves budget doesn't mean it's a done deal. We're just trying to get this done because of some extenuating circumstances with one stop.
And I'm not blaming you, or
I'm not taking it as blame.
Okay. I just want to be clear. It just strikes me that there's a number of steps that we're missing. And if I'm unclear on the motion, correct me. We're not moving it, we're approving it. Are we approving, or are we?
A good point, excellent point. You are approving it contingent on the signatures being received on Wednesday by noon. So so you're approving it now to move forward, but if we don't get the signatures by noon, the full commission won't even see this.
And it'll be also contingent on the PBA folks appearing, the attorneys appearing, to answer all the questions.
I wouldn't make that a contingent, because I think they'll come at the request of the mayor, but I can't force somebody to come, Commissioner.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But I think they would come and be willing to offer an explanation, because quite honestly, this body's providing the funding for a mistake that the county didn't make. And that's the bottom line. And you are deserving, on representing the taxpayers, you're deserving a detailed explanation of what happened and why it happened.
Michael?
I want to clarify something. Tonight, what you would be approving to send to the full commission would be a budget amendment, that agreement would be between PBA and Rock City. And I'm not saying you shouldn't see the agreement. I'm just saying what you would be voting on is a general fund budget amendment and authorizing the PBA to spend that increased funding. That agreement we anticipate having here by signed by next Wednesday, is what the mayor is saying. The mayor has said he would like to pull that, and I agree if the signatures, if that is not signed. One of the reasons we would have liked to have had it signed before tonight, and we've been working on this, but if we didn't get it tonight, we would have had to have brought it up under other business at commission, and then the timing would have been off, and we would have had to put it off until February, which would have held up the projects and some other projects with PBA. But I just wanted to clarify that.
So if we move the money on a general budget amendment, they don't show up with the signatures, do we then have to reverse it? Is that the?
No, I think what the mayor is trying to say is he's going to pull that. He would like to pull that from the commission agenda if it's not signed. Would like to pull that, or would request that that be pulled and not approved at the commission if it's not signed.
Correct.
Commissioner Gooch, would you agree to add to your motion contingent upon the agreement between the PBA and Rock City being approved?
Contingent on the signatures.
Okay, and the
Yeah.
second, who was the second? Commissioner Johnson, would you approve that also? Okay, so.
Thank you.
The motion now is contingent upon the signatures being received and the agreement in place with PBA and Rock City for this to go through. Any other questions on this?
I'll just make,
Commissioner Piercy.
Has the work on this project stopped?
No.
Has anyone checked to see if they could possibly be insured for their shortfalls?
Commissioner, that question came up several weeks ago, and I want to get with Nick and Brick, but it seems like there was no insurance in that regard required on this project. I need to check on that, so don't hold me to that answer, but I do recall that coming up.
We did ask that question. There's no specific insurance for material cost escalation or site conditions like the rock we were talking about. There's no insurance on that. That's what the contingency is for. And so we have used the contingency up that was in the project. I believe that contingency was a certain percentage. I don't know it off the top of my head. We have used that up. That contingency is in place for kind of insurance, and that has been used up, and that's why we're refunding the contingency up to $25,000. And I believe the new contract between the attorneys, anything over that, Rock City would eat or not bill us for.
Well, let me ask you one more question, and I hesitated throwing this out here. But, well, no, I'm going to throw it out there, but I'd like to get home in the next 10 or 15 minutes or be able to start there. But what about a surety bond on the rest of this? You know, I want some assurance that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Can we ask for a surety bond? Is that something our attorneys are working out? Or?
I think Nick would probably be better to answer that, but I will tell you, I don't know that the agreement would be signed by Thursday if that was the case, next Thursday.
Tell Nick to be there with bells on Thursday night, so. Okay, any other discussion on this? Any questions? Hearing none. Commissioner Irvin.
Okay, I'll vote to, I'm just going to clarify, to move this to the commission.
We have a motion in a second.
No, I know, yes, but I'm just clarifying one thing about my vote. I'm going to vote to move it on to the commission, but I would like to see the contract, if we don't have this, fully signed, and I'm with hesitation is what I'm trying to say, because I do have a number of open questions about the contract and everything else. I'm just trying to clarify.
No, let me do this. That's a valid question and a valid inquiry. As soon as my office gets the contracts from the PBA, we will find a way to get those to the members for their review if that's what you want to do. I can't think of anything I'd rather do less than read a contract, but if that is something that excites you, Commissioner Irvin, I will be glad to assist you in that regard.
That and the financials and the supporting stuff.
Right. So, and I'm tired. It's been a long day, so my apologies, gentlemen. But I will say this: if you want a copy of the supporting documents in the contract, just shoot me a text or an email, and my office will get you those. Will that work? Thank you.
Chairman
Michael,
Harris.
what is the total amount for this building?
1 second, I got to add two numbers together.
Been asking a lot of questions, putting you on the hot seat, I'm sorry. Let me just tell you why I'm asking this question. Because I think Commissioner Irvin doesn't understand it and I see what he's saying, but you're holding 5% retainer. That's a big number.
So, yes, it is. As it grows, every time they send us a bill, of course, it's through a regular AIA contract, so, that grows, and architect reviews it before it comes to us. So the original, now this project has been amended several times, but before tonight, before you approved this, or before this came up, the project was $6,363,060. Now, if you add on, essentially another $1 million, that would be the total cost of the building. However, you can really only add $680 to the retainage we would receive because that's what we're being billed for. So roughly $7 million.
We're holding enough retainage, we're going to be okay. So that number is about $320,000.
Yes, our retainage at the end of this project should be right around $350,000. That's the total project cost. Of course, all of that project cost doesn't go to Rock City, but yes, about $350,000 in retainage.
Any other questions? Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Serena?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Motion carries. There being no other business, we are adjourned.